Architecture and Acoustics at Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Sir is an architect with over 21 years of academic and professional experience. He currently teaches doctoral, postgraduate, and undergraduate students. He presently coordinates the doctoral program in architecture. He developed and coordinated the master's program in architecture pedagogy for around a decade. He has attempted to transform the postgraduate and undergraduate studios into an experimental around for architecture research though through a research-based approach to teaching. His key research interests includes architectural research, architecture education, public interest design, digital design, visual communications, and architectural history. He has regularly published research papers in journals and revived and presented papers in conferences. He has been invited to speak at various academic institutions as a speaker, as an external member of BOS, and as a jury member at the postgraduate and undergraduate levels. He has undertaken professional consultancy for architectural projects in various capacities. He also takes keen interest in photography and has participated in national and international photographic exhibitions. Now, without wasting much time, I request Professor Mohammad Saquib sir to come and on screen and enlighten us with his words of wisdom. Over to you, sir. Sir, the house is open for you.
Thank you, Junaid sir. I hope the slides are visible.
Sir, slides is no, sir.
Slide is not visible
Yeah.
because I have uploaded it. I
Yes.
don't know.
Sir, no problem. If you want.
No, I want to show slides actually. And
Yes,
is
sir.
it really
Yes, sir.
not visible? Is the slide
Yes,
visible?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Thanks a lot. So, all the members out there, a warm uh, good morning, I would say. And it's really good. I don't know how many people are there and whether they are online or offline, but I really hope that we have some meaningful discussion today. Thanks to Nessa for that profound introduction of mine, and I'm not that much of an exaggerated person. Uh,
Yes.
so I have been doing a few things, and this is just one part of it which I'm trying to research on. So, as I have been told that the topic was about discussion on policy frameworks to eradicate rural poverty. So, how does it comes to me? Because you all must have heard that I'm an architect, and I have been doing research. I have been publishing papers and all. But the issue is that within architecture also we have a lot of disciplines, and my area of research, my PhD, is about public interest design. And if you see the word itself, it says public interest. So my area of design concerns was about understanding ways to design for the people, so that this design does not become something only for the classes, that is for the rich people, but design caters to the masses, that is for the poor also, or maybe those who are not poor but still they are not able to afford. So that was my area of concerns, and this presentation came out of that curiosity about if design can respond to the concerns of the people who really matter and who are big in number but who are not able to afford. What does the government do about them? What does the world do about them? What are the various organizations which are out there? How do they reach out to people like them? So we all know that poverty is a global phenomena, and whatever, irrespective of whatever is done, there are still a lot of number of people who fall below the poverty line. So my area of concern, it will be more on understanding what is poverty and what do we mean when we try to understand poverty in terms of rural, when we attach the word rural. And then we will try to have a discussion on what are the various ways which people have come up to eradicate poverty. So obviously we'll be talking about specific reference to India and what the Indian governments have been doing since independence, and what are the current ways, current frameworks to eradicate poverty. So, with the hope that my slide is visible to you all, and Junaid Saab, if, in case if my slide is not visible, please let me know whenever
Oh,
anything
sure,
is apparent
sure,
to you.
sir. Sure, sir.
And I'm really sorry to you all because my camera has some issues. So
No problem,
sorry,
sir. Sir,
but I
sir, go
hope,
ahead. No problem.
my
Yeah,
conversations will be intriguing to you all.
yeah, yeah, yes, sir.
So, starting with what is poverty. So, as a researcher, it's always better to start with very basic things, seeing it fundamentally. So, the world's best dictionaries talk about poverty in these ways. The Oxford talks about poverty as the state of being poor. Cambridge also talks about some similar thing, state of being very poor. And Merriam-Webster talks about it as the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. So all in all, we know, and that is what is defined fundamentally also, that it is the state of being poor. The only thing is that Merriam-Webster defines it in a more detailed way. Now, the definition is somewhat known to us, but we do not know how to understand poverty when we want to actually work on it. So, uh, when we start and trying to understand poverty, we need to understand uh, beyond what is poverty. We need to understand poverty in various ways. One way of understanding poverty is to understand various types of poverty which exist. So, if you analyze, there are various people have worked on it, and they define poverty into these various types. So, situational poverty is something like a temporary job loss, a temporary mental situation or family situation like divorce or something like that, a death in a family, a health crisis such as the pandemic, which we have witnessed. That was a situational poverty. So many people dipped to poverty in those times. We have seen those tragic pictures of laborers walking down various cities and into the highways and expressways. So that was a pathetic sight to see. But that was a situational poverty. Unfortunately, for many, that didn't remain a situational poverty. It became an absolute poverty, which means a permanent sort of lack of resources, which includes primarily food insecurity. There are other ways of understanding poverties, like there's this generational poverty. So it says that if you have more than two generations who are living below poverty line, then it is generational poverty. Relative poverty means that if you have an average income which is below 50% of what people are in your area, so that is relative poverty. Many a times it may be something which may not even be counted as poverty, because if you live in a high class society and if your income is below 50%, then you may be understood as relatively in poverty, but you are not in poverty. But when you consider cases in terms of average of a city, of average of a nation, then relative poverty may also matter a lot. Then you can classify it into urban and rural poverty. So that is where our topic is going down, because we have to talk about rural poverty. So urban poverty and rural poverty basically both relate to lack of resources. The only sense in which we can understand it in a different way is that the issues which govern the urban centers may be different as compared to issues which govern the rural centers. So maybe like in urban areas, safety issue or overcrowding, sanitation may be more important issue. And if you have lack of sanitation, lack of safety, if you feel overcrowded, then maybe you live in a situation of poverty. But when you talk about rural areas, it may you may be talking about various other things like lacks of access to technology. So these days, uh, lack of internet, lack of availability of internet is also computed to be one dimension of poverty. Because if we talk about rights for all, then access to technology is also understood as uh, right uh, for all. Similarly, child care, lots of issues happen in terms of child, in terms of gender, in terms of their lack of access to education. So there are many issues which you will see that they are more highlighted in rural as compared to urban. So maybe we can say that issues of urban are different as compared to issues of rural. And that way, poverty or indicators of poverty may vary. Different people have tried to understand causes of poverty, why it happens. So the issues may seem to be quite similar, but people have tried to uh, create categories and hierarchies among them. Like this one talks about poverty in terms of poor planning of natural resources and unemployment, and then economic situation, and the large population. While others also have tried to understand poverty in terms of how poverty can have various indicators, how it can be understood in terms of various indicators. So, like various researchers of the view are of the view that maybe there can be two parts. Like some are usual indicators, like if you don't have much income, again it has to be defined, then it can be one concern of poverty. If you have resources which you have to consume, but you do not have enough access to what you have to consume, then it is again one indicator of poverty. Then there can be other indicators like illiteracy, malnutrition, lack of access to drinking water, safe drinking water, sanitation. So there can be many other things, but these are termed as the more important indicators. So again, if we want to go deeper, we can keep on exploring about how much income, how much level of consumption, how much illiteracy will be counted as an indicator of poverty, how much malnutrition. So we all know that. I hope the slide is visible. Okay, fine. So with this view, with this view, we proceed, and different people have tried to understand poverty in terms of cause and effect relationship, and try to understand the solutions. So like listing, like addressing poverty in terms of climatic concerns, in terms of orphanism, lack of education. So you will see that most of the issues are similar, irrespective of which organization or which researchers have studied it. And this is also a fact, as we talked, that poverty and indicators of poverty may vary with situation. As I said that in rural areas it may be different as compared to the urban area. Similarly, poverty may have different yardsticks in the global south, that is India and other Southeast Asian countries, as compared to poverty in the west or poverty in African countries. So we may have different indicators of poverty, and that way we need to understand poverty in terms of a global phenomena first of all. So the United Nations says that poverty is more than the lack of income. It's not just the lack of income, it is more than lack of income. And the productive resources to ensure sustainable livelihoods. So, in short, the United Nations links poverty to sustainable livelihoods, and it further elaborates that includes hunger and malnutrition, limited access to education, basic services, social discrimination and exclusion, lack of participation in decision making. So there are various other factors which are taken into account when you talk about poverty as something which can be related to sustainability. So that is how United Nations sees it, and it talks about various facts and figures. Like, one of the important fact is that 10% of the world's population lives with less than $1.9 a day. That's that sums up to something around 150 rupees in our currency, the Indian rupee. So if somebody lives with around 150 rupees for a day, then it is one of the indicators of poverty. And then it goes on to elaborate facts such as Southern Asia, like in India, and African countries are expected to see the largest increases in extreme poverty. So we are the ones who are expected to see largest increase. So that's not a very good situation. And though there are facts and figures to suggest that extreme poverty fell by half over the last decade. So there are facts and figures, not only United Nations but various other uh, institutions like the IMF, the ADB have talked about it. But there is another fact that because of the COVID, many more people have been tipped into situation of poverty, and so much so that it is believed that they may not be still able to live beyond the poverty lines at least up till 2030. And then the other figures say that one out of the five children live in extreme poverty, and 55% of the bus population did not benefit from any scheme which are provided to them by governments or organizations. So this is again an important fact, because we have to talk about policy frameworks. And the United Nations report in 2016 suggests that 55% of the worst population are not benefited from any scheme. So that is a question to ponder, the food for thought one to really think that uh, how effective these schemes are actually. So, talking about the United Nations and the way it elaborates SDGs or Sustainability Development Goals, you all know, it specifically elaborates one relevant section which says that to ensure significant mobilization of resources from a variety of resources, including through enhanced development cooperation, in order to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, in particular least developed countries, to implement programs and policies to end poverty in all its dimensions. So, to summarize, it talks about developing and least developed countries and trying to come up with ways to eradicate poverties in these areas, in developing as well as least developing countries. Now, we all know that what are the sustainable development goals. These are set of 17 goals which have been established. And just to tell you that the number one goal is to eradicate poverty. That itself suggests us about how relevant, how important uh, this this fact is, this issue is, and how important it is to address poverty. And then it it goes on to talk about poverty in terms of India. So the SDGs, the United Nations website suggests that for the number goal one goal poverty, it talks about various things. It talks about various facts like 27.5% of the population is dimensionally multidimensionally poor. One in every four persons in India is poor. So 25% of the population is poor according to them. If you talk about in terms of poverty line, and then 42% of population in India have access to internet. That is something good, but I believe that access to technology is though one of the relevant things, but food, shelter, and clothing is one of the most primary things to start with. So if we eradicate issues of food, shelter, and clothing in terms of poverty, thereafter access to technology comes. You cannot say that you have, just because you have access to technology, you have eradicated poverty. So anything uh, beyond the idea of food, shelter, and clothing comes later to it. So again, SDG says that they are aimed to create sound policy frameworks at national and regional levels, which they talk about equal rights in terms of economic resources, access to basic services, ownership, forms of property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, financial services, etc. So they lay out various factors to eradicate poverty. Now, again, as I said, what are the indicators of poverty and how to measure it? So, as they said, that 10% of the first population live at below $1.9 a day. So, the goal which they set in 2013 was that to have no more than 3%, because earlier it used to be 10% of first population living below 1.9. Now, they set a goal that not more than 3% of the world's population should be living uh, in just $1.9 a day by 2030. Now, though it may sound very simple, but with the advent of COVID, it has just worsened the situation. So it's not that easy actually, particularly in countries like India, where we have sort of huge capitalist configurations coming up. So where there are business houses who have been growing up like anything, and then there are people who have been going down the poverty line. So again, lots and lots of people are going down. So in terms of poverty line, I showed you the global perspective, what the United Nations says. In terms of India, a committee a committee which defined poverty line was known as Suresh Tendulkar Committee, and it determined the basis of poverty line on the basis of monthly expenses, like expenses on food, education, health, transport, and electricity. So they came up with this idea that any person lives below the poverty line in urban area if he spends just 33 rupees a day, and in rural area if he spends 27 rupees a day. Now this in itself is something worth pondering over, because as of today the world benchmark is 1.9, that is $150, 150 rupees approximately. Now the poverty line in itself in India is much below. That in itself is something to understand. Now, even if we understand it in terms of the Indian context, then too we will see that there are lots and lots of people who live below this poverty line. This is one of the graphs of the world map, which talks about the poverty in terms of uh, in terms of how it is spread globally, and it shows that how India is placed. And as I said, there are various reports which suggest, there are contrasting reports basically, like World Bank, even the World Bank report which it created. Various people have interpreted it in various ways. Like Economic Times is talking about the report in such a way that there has been a decline from 2011 to 2019. But if you go to various other newspapers, they will tell the same report in various other ways. So uh, they do suggest that there has been a decline in rural areas, but again, with COVID, like 2019, they are talking about, with COVID coming up, there has been a sharp increase after 2019. So again, the World Bank suggests that 15% of the rural population in India is living below. Sorry, not India, but world over is living below poverty line. There has been different other perspectives like poverty headcount, which the World Bank has come up. So if you can see the poverty line graph is right here. The orange one is which is going. The dark one is of the world and the light one is of India. So you can see that they are more or less matched. So the poverty line of the poverty rate of percentage of poverty in terms of world and India, they are almost similar. Now talking about the rural poor, who are they? So we are talking about rural poor. So the the rural poor largely depend on, and they are the one who largely depend on agriculture, fishing, forestry, and small scale industries and services. Fine. So the Niti report, the Planning Commission, which was earlier known as the Planning Commission, the Niti Aayog report suggests that poverty ratio is 32.75% in rural areas and 8.81% in urban areas. So more people are into poverty in rural areas. That itself suggests that we need some really strong schemes and framework to eradicate or at least lesser the number of percentage of people in poverty in rural areas. So various organizations have talked about eradicating measures to eradicate poverty, and people have talked about about it in various ways, like where the focus of policy should be. So it says that the focus of policy should be for small landowners. It should be to cultivate their land, for the landless tenants to cultivate others people's land, and so on. But if we analyze in terms of India, the frameworks which irrespective of what people or organizations are seeing, what India has done in this regard. So when we analyze, we see that basically the policy frameworks are done by the government. So government means central or state government. So basically the center has center earlier established after independence planning commission, which was initiated in 1950, and it carried on up till 2014, and then thereafter in 2015 it came with a new rigor in with the name of Niti Aayog. So all the measures which have been taken, they are primarily being guided or done by these these policy framework committees. So there are various schemes which have been undertaken to address poverty alleviation, like wage employment programs like Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, employment assurance scheme, and all various land reforms, various plan strategy, 9 plan, 8 plan, 10 plans, sort of anti-poor laws and policies have been created. There have been ways, people have attempted to integrate poverty alleviation programs with sectoral programs, and there have been people have government have tried to create mechanism for delivery so that they do not just remain in books, and they deliver something. There are other programs like the IRDP, the TRISIM, CITRA, and the development of women and children. We'll just try to address each of them in a summarized way because the time will be short. So, with this idea that how relevant it is to understand poverty and to eradicate it, and the government has come up with various schemes since independence. Now, to start with, the scheme IRDP is the Integrated Rural Development Program. This is something which is continuing even today. So it initiated in 1978 and it started functioning around 1980. The aim of which was to provide support to the rural poor, and how this support was happening in the form of subsidy or bank credit. So the government used to give bank credit or in subsidized accept subsidized rates so that people can take these loans and carve their own life. You know? So this is something which is still continuing. Loans at subsidized rates so that the farmers can or the villagers can do something of their own and raise their standard of living. So this scheme has been popular even till now, though minor changes have been happening because it has been going on since 1980. So minor changes have been happening every 5 or 10 years. The other schemes are like Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, uh, which is basically to generate additional employment opportunities for the landless people. So something similar to it later evolved in the form of Manrega, which we will be talking about. So this scheme again goes back up till 1980s, and it came in various forms with various other names. Then there is this Pradhan Mantri Grameen Awas Yojana. Again, it was launched in 1985, and the aim was to create 20 lakh housing units by giving loans to people at subsidized rates. So you see that many a times government has tried to lend hand by providing loans at subsidized rates so that others can also the rural population can move up beyond the poverty lines. So this scheme also aimed at to improve the standard of living of rural areas in terms of their health, their primary education, water uh, facility, roads, and as we discussed, housing. Again, there is this another scheme which came up, Jawahar Rozgar Yojana, which aimed to provide 90 to 100 days of employment per person because employment is a big issue in rural areas. So it aimed to provide 90 to 100 days of employment. So you can see that something similar to the Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Scheme is schemes are being refined. They are giving different names. Then again, target public distribution system, which aim to distribute essential food commodities. So distributing essential foods like rice, wheat, kerosene at subsidized rates to people who live beyond the poverty line. There have been schemes in for the maternity benefit also. So schemes like for the pregnant mother, they were providing 6,000 rupees in three installments to take care of the maternity related issues. But there on after 2000, uh, there are other schemes which came up. Again, you will see a strong link between the earlier and the coming up schemes because the issues remain the same. So if you see the issues of food, shelter, and clothing were being addressed up till 2000. Now beyond 2000, you again see schemes like providing food to senior citizens, development of infrastructures in rural areas like roads, schools, hospitals. So again, the issues remain the same. So it in itself suggests that though interventions have been done by various governments, and there still have been issues which remain to be addressed. Again, one scheme known as Antyodaya Ann Yojana again aimed to provide food grains at high subsidized rates. Sampur Grami Rozgar Yojana. Again, something similar to providing rozgar or employment. So it's a sort of assuring employment, and if there is no sort of employment, you do something, government makes you do something, and then provides you. So in that new rigor, Manrega, which was popularly known as Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, it's exists even now, which again aims to provide livelihood security for the rural people by providing at least 100 days of wage employment. So you can see that Similar issues are being addressed, similar schemes are being undertaken. Few schemes continued under the previous names, but even the new schemes which came up, they are trying to address issues which are similar in nature or exactly same. Then there is this National Rural Livelihood Mission, which again aim to reduce poverty by enabling the poor households to access gainful self-employment and skill wage employment opportunities. So again, schemes to eradicate poverty by providing employment and improve the livelihoods towards a sustainable growth. Beyond 2011 and beyond that 2013, I would say, because with the change of government, we see change in the way it was being addressed. So I won't say that the issues became different. The issues were same, and many a times schemes which were launched reflected the earlier concerns, but sometimes in a new way, like the PMUY, Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, which aimed to provide 50 million LPG connections to women. So this was a concern which was not addressed earlier. And similarly, the employment assurance scheme, which actually continued since 1993, uh, it aimed to provide uh, covers for areas which are drought prone, desert areas, tribal areas, or hilly areas. So, especially areas which are quite remote in nature, there they try to extend the scheme. And then the food for work program, again, it carried on especially in some districts like Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Odisha, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and it aimed to enhance food security through wage employment. Then there is this PMGAY, or again commonly known as PMAY, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and when it goes rural, it says Pradhan Mantri Gramin Awas Yojana. So it basically aimed to provide housing for the Indian rural poor, and which basically means that anyone living below the BPL, the below poverty line, it was a program meant for them. Similar program, as I said, Indira Awas Yojana, if you analyze, there have been various other previous programs. So a similar such program was running in the name of Indira Awas Yojana. So you see some sort of similarity, but yes, it has changed the life of people living in the rural areas in various ways, and many people are benefited from it. But having said all these things, uh, I would not say that governments have not intervened. Governments have tried to intervene and benefit the people in various ways, but somehow you see that uh, the benefits have not reached the last person. So some people have been benefited by other, while others still remain. The other issues also remain, like when you provide or when you address issues like issues of employment and provide schemes like the Manrega, where you provide livelihood. In order to provide livelihood, you provide wages for 100 days. Uh, People have been critical of it also, like uh, it may not serve the large purpose. The larger purpose can be to eradicate poverty, and for eradicating poverty, it is really important for us to understand that providing 100 days of wage may not work. Instead, providing a means of employment where they can keep generating their own employment, their own resources, their own money will be a better option. So, which means that many a times the schemes may look beneficial. They may be uh, they may be short term in the long run. So the need for now is to understand that long-term schemes are also equally important apart from the short-term schemes. While short-term schemes may address instant issues of food, shelter, and clothing, there has to be long-term schemes which should address to change the way people live in rural or uh, the remote areas of India, because we know that a major part of India is constituted by the rural areas. So if we change the rural India, we will change our country, the way our country is shaped. More lesser people will try to come to the urban centers, and that way there will be issues which will be resolved not only in terms of the rural but as well as the urban. So with this, I would like to thank you all for listening, and any discussion, any question, anything we can discuss, I'm open to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure, sir.
Sir, if you may allow, our attendees are having some question.
Sure.
Okay. Sir, first question is whether sustained, inclusive, and equitable economic growth in developing countries is sufficient for poverty eradication, especially in a populous country like India?
I think I have answered the question. We have sustainable development goals, and these goals have to be long term to understand and eradicate poverty. But there has to be short term goals also. So actually, I would say there has to be medium term goals also. So the goals have to be in different time frames. It has to be long term, it has to be short term, and it has to be medium term also, to understand and address the issues in a relevant way. We cannot just have long term goals and not address the short issues. We cannot just have short term goals eradication and not address the issues in a big way. So all these ways has to have to be simultaneous.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, now second question is how rural development and agriculture productivity growth are crucial for poverty eradication.
It is very much crucial because when we say that India is primarily still agricultural in rural areas, so the way to eradicate poverty is to actually enrich the agricultural base of Indian economy, and it will not only serve the purpose of uplifting the rural people. It will also serve the purpose of having more food security. So in a global world like today, we will be less dependent on other countries. We are still less dependent, but why not be not at all dependent? So
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
my
sir,
pleasure.
for your thought-provoking and detailed lecture. And now I would like to
I hope
invite Dr. Shipra
I
Mishra.
hope I have done
Yes.
justice to what you people were.
Thank you,
No,
Junaid
no,
sir.
sir.
Hello, Shipra.
Uh, Shipra, ma'am, please propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I, Dr. Shipra Mishra, Assistant Professor, on behalf of entire faculty of Law Integral University, would like to express my pleasure to deliver vote of thanks for today's session. With profound privilege, I would like to record my sincere appreciation to Dr. Mohammad Saquib sir, Associate Professor, Faculty of Architecture, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, for giving us time from his busy schedule for discussing with us the policy frameworks to eradicate rural poverty, implementation of effective poverty reduction strategies, territorial based action plans, sectoral and multi-sectoral approaches, and harmonization at the national and international level that must be adopted to better tackle the rural dimensions of poverty reduction as one of the key goals under sustainable development. I hope that everyone present here will have a lot to take away from your inspiring and thought provoking words. Lastly, I also want to thank all the participants from multidisciplinary fields for joining us virtually and participating actively in the session. Thank you all. To conclude, let me once again reiterate my gratitude to you, sir. Thank you, sir, for virtually addressing us. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Shipra ma'am, for all these kind words. They really they really inspire me. And connecting people from Lucknow always matters to me, especially because I myself am from Lucknow. So it was really nice meeting and communicating with you all. And I hope to interact with you people again. So
Inshallah,
thanks
sir.
again. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
may I log out?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.